Welcome to the Energizing India podcast, a program that focuses on electric mobility in India, giving a voice to this industry sector. My name is Ravin Mirchandani, and on this program we feature conversations with key protagonists and industry leaders, creating a narrative on how to facilitate faster adoption of electric mobility in India. Today is going to be an interesting show, as we are in fact talking about what happens beyond lithium. After the invention of the wheel, options for human transportation barely evolved over 4,000 years. The arrival of the Internal Combustion Engine, or the ICE, changed all of that during the late 1800s. During the early 1900s, the electric starter was first employed to start the ICE engines in cars using lead-acid batteries, which then in fact allowed the ICE technology to win the first great battle of mobility technology against electric vehicles. Since that time, lead-acid batteries have been used to power all onboard systems on vehicles and even provide backup energy storage for static energy applications. A competitor to lead-acid emerged in the 1970s, and a decade of innovation saw the first commercially viable lithium batteries implemented in 1985. The age of lithium had in fact arrived, giving us phones, personal portable electronic gadgets, and eventually even underpinning the electric mobility renaissance that we are witnessing today. But there is a dark side to lithium power. The need to rape entire hillsides to power our mobility and communications using a finite source of energy for an ever-hungry and growing human need is not sustainable. Quite frankly, if all of us on the planet moved to electric mobility today, there would not be enough lithium to power our hopes, and prices would soar, resulting in all of us having to make the choice to keep polluting the air we breathe using petrol and diesel vehicles. Hydrogen is often thought of as a panacea to this problem, as an FCEV uses only 1/10 the amount of lithium for mobility. But there may be a new, exciting development that has popped its head up over the horizon. It's a battery technology that has been doing the rounds for a few years now, and seems to have finally landed on a firm footing and could help save the future of our hopes and aspirations for a cleaner planet that is not built on the premise of humans pillaging scarce natural resources. That technology could be sodium-ion batteries. Faradion, a British company based in Sheffield in the United Kingdom, is pioneering the next generation of advanced low-cost battery materials employing sodium-ion technology, which it says is indistinguishable from leading other technologies for energy storage in terms of performance, and can in fact even be cheaper. We speak today with James Quinn, CEO of Faradion and a technology executive and entrepreneur of both public and private companies, mergers and acquisitions, and venture capital investments. James, we're delighted to have you here. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Ravin. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very happy to speak to you. We see India as a very exciting market opportunity for sodium ion and Faradion in particular.
Well, we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But James, first up, you seem like a really interesting bloke. You're an American, working for an English company, living in Germany. What's the go there? What's the background?
Isn't that almost normal these days, right? Yeah, so I had my first company in Palo Alto in Silicon Valley, and I sold that company to a public company in Germany, and that's what kind of brought me over into Europe. And then I've been a serial entrepreneur ever since, and I've done 4 or 5 other companies, and I think Faradion is probably the first company I've worked at that my kids actually understand what I do. You know, when they get in the car, the first thing they want to do is charge their phone, right?
So have you been in energy storage all your life, or is this your first foray into the battery industry?
Yeah, this is the first foray into battery industry, but I had a company doing electrochemistry in Sweden previously. It was really related to the semiconductor industry, but it was electrochemistry. It was a plating type technology, and so there were definitely a lot of similarities. Scaling a new technology, commercializing new technology, so there's a lot of parallels. What's quite different though, if you open up a semiconductor device, it's like a jewel. It's beautiful. You open up a battery and it's quite different.
So true. So Faradion is an interesting company as well, started by one of the pioneers of the lithium ion industry as well, and today onto a very different trajectory with you in the driving seat. Tell us a little bit about Faradion, James.
Yeah, so Faradion was started about 10 years ago, and it takes 10 years to commercialize a new battery chemistry. One of the co-founders, Chris Wright, he was one of the co-founders of IP to IPO, which became the IP Group, which is really pretty famous in Europe. It's one of the largest investors in intellectual property from universities like Oxford and Cambridge and so forth. Chris, at the time, the first lithium cobalt oxide was developed in Oxford by a pretty famous guy named Professor John Goodenough. And John Goodenough won the Nobel Prize, as you probably know, for lithium. It was the first high-energy lithium technology. And Chris was the CEO of the group that had the rights to that technology. And Chris licensed that to a number of companies, the most famous being Sony. And Sony was the first one to use rechargeable lithium technology in the market in 1991 for the Sony camcorder. I think I still have some of those batteries in the bottom drawer at home from those cameras.
So, modern legend has it that when Tesla first came up with its car, there weren't many lithium-ion battery manufacturers, and so they in effect took the same camcorder battery technology and used 18,000 of those cells to power the car. Is that true?
That's a good question. I can't say if that's true or not, but it's a great story. I think it's great. I really like the history of batteries. I'm actually going to try to get away over the weekend. I'm going to Lake Como in Italy, and that's where the first battery was invented by Alessandro Volta. And there's a museum there, and much to my children's relief, it was closed last year when I went. So I will try to make the pilgrimage this weekend. In fact, when batteries were first invented, they didn't really know what to do with them, and they were using them to try to reanimate dead people, and it became a bit of a sideshow, and ultimately that led to the writing of Frankenstein. So it's quite an interesting history there.
It is, to go from trying to animate dead people to actually having something to power your car. What a long trajectory to get here. So let's talk about sodium ion then. We talked about the history of batteries. Lead acid was the first battery technology, helped crank up the IC engine, brought us the modern electronic gadgets, but it's got problems, as we know. And the problems with lithium is the fact that it's a finite resource. It's not exactly the best for our planet. It's incredibly expensive and needs a number of other chemistries to make it work. And the sorts of benefits that your technology is promising is almost a lithium kind of performance at a lead acid kind of cost, but not having to rape and pillage the planet, not needing precious minerals or natural resources like graphite, cobalt, copper, or lithium by itself, and is abundantly available in all countries, isn't it? Salt and sodium is available in most countries, which makes them independent of their energy needs. I'm interested, James, it seems almost like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and yet everyone's busy investing in lithium ion. What's happening? Why has it taken so long for sodium to land, and where do you see sodium ion fitting in the global energy landscape, and how soon?
I think it's interesting when Faradion got involved with sodium ion, and Faradion was started as a company. It's not a spin out of a university. We own all of the IP and so forth. But it was a white space. Really, nobody was really working much on it. It was pretty much neglected. And I think there was a lot of biases towards it that were ultimately unfounded. That it would be too heavy, it wouldn't have high enough energy density, and I think people did a little bit of experiments and kind of moved on quite quickly. We had a different view of it, and we put a lot of time and resources to scale the technology to the point that it is competitive with lithium iron phosphate initially, and then we think the technology has a lot of headroom. It's got legs to close into somewhere in 250 watt hours per kilogram and above. We actually have some data and some proof points of that in the labs to be able to scale up. So I think there were some biases towards it. Now where we are today, if you fast forward today, we're generating revenue, we're shipping product, we're already in the business, and I think that's something that's maybe still people think it's still a bit researchy, but we're actually commercialized the technology. We have customers, we have product out in the field as well. And I think if you take a look, if you step back a moment, sodium ion and lithium ion have actually a lot of similarities. They're very complementary in many ways. There's a lot of, they're also quite comparable and compatible, if you will. We use the exact same manufacturing equipment that uses lithium ion. Our cells are made on the exact same lines, same equipment. There's no special equipment or processes or different, it's just a change in chemistry. What you're seeing is, if you look at it, there's really a triangle of really only 2 or 3 countries that really have the amount of lithium reserves. If you look at Chile, for example, to produce the lithium they produce today, it requires 65% of the water reserves of the nation. I mean, that's huge. It takes 2 million liters of water to produce 1 ton of lithium, which is enough for 90 cars. That's a problem. It's just a fundamental problem. The other thing is lithium prices were down a few years ago, and so there wasn't a lot of investment in new mining. And now that this demand is really taken off, and all of this legislation and banning ICE automobiles, and every major automotive company announcing they're going into all electric, has created this white oil rush for lithium.
So James, you've raised a very pertinent point, and that is that lithium mining needs a tremendous amount of water, doesn't it? You talked about how 2 million liters of water are used to produce just one ton of lithium, which is enough at the moment to power 90 cars. That's a significant amount of water being used, and you previously, in some of the discussions you've had and some of the advocacy messages you've given around the world, you've talked about how almost 60% plus of the water resources of a particular country in Latin America are being used just for lithium mining. Can you talk a little bit about this and why this is necessary, and how the sodium ion technology actually liberates us from having to use this much water to power our mobility?
Yeah, it's part of the mining process, and they use brine, and it's just a very water-intensive process. Sodium ion, or sodium chloride, actually is 1,000 times more plentiful in the earth than lithium. It costs today somewhere around $13,000 to $15,000 a ton to mine lithium. Sodium is about $150, so it's a significant cost differential. So that has a lot of impact on the availability of it, on energy security. You may have seen the announcement recently. CATL, the largest battery company in the world, has announced that they'll be going into producing sodium ion technology in 2023 because 80% of the lithium in China is imported. And China has still been one of the largest markets for EV. And it's just not sustainable.
Hearing you, I feel very excited, because I think in many ways what always worries me about electric mobility is the fact that it rests on lithium, and the implications of energy independence, and also the environmental impact of lithium mining. Do you see sodium ion being used in all applications that lithium is used in today? For example, not just static energy and electric mobility, but also heavy vehicle mobility, and finally, personal electronic portable products, which is really a big source of lithium ion demand today as well.
Yeah, so interesting. I think again, while lithium's been getting all the sexy headlines and all of that, what people don't realize is 70% of the market is still lead acid. I mean, lead acid is a significant market. It's still growing, grows 4 to 5% compound annual growth rate per year. Revenue-wise, the market's close to 50-50 because lithium is more expensive and it's growing at a faster compound annual growth rate. So if you take a look at the low-hanging fruit for a new technology, lead acid is clearly that opportunity. So if you have a lead acid business or application and you want to move to lithium ion, it's a much more costly transition to do. So if you want a high performance solution, but at a more cost effective way to get there, sodium ion is the way to do that. So the lead acid applications, so if you look at three-wheelers, your e-rickshaws, you look at forklifts, you look at a lot of these kind of applications, also utility grid and commercial and industrial, those are clearly really wonderful opportunities for sodium ion technology because it gives them that level of performance but at the cost of ownership. Why is the cost of ownership lower? Because sodium ion does not use lithium, it does not use copper, does not have cobalt, so it's inherently less expensive. It doesn't have those expensive raw materials. Now, if you go to the next level of the technology, as we're advancing the technology, we're coming out with a new chemistry in the second half of next year. So our chemistry, Whetstone, will be releasing the second half of next year. This is 170 watt-hour per kilogram technology. 5,000 cycles. This is a 1,000,000-mile battery. So that's a 1,000,000-mile battery for passenger EVs. It's not that we're going into passenger EVs next year, but it enables us to have the cell and the chemistry to partner with the OEMs to really integrate this technology. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity. Some of the customers we've spoken to said, this comes out in the market that's unparalleled. There's nothing on the market that can be that low cost and have the ability to go 1,000,000 miles.
So you talked about the Whetstone technology, which will then eventually be used in passenger electric vehicles. I'm assuming this is sodium ion technology, but in next generation. So what has changed between your present Faradion offering to when you launched the Whetstone technology that puts you into passenger EVs?
Yeah, so there's two kinds of innovations, if you will. We have our engineering team that's doing cumulative iterative improvements. So we may do something to the cathode, and then on top of that we do something to the anode, and then on the next generation is doing something to the electrolyte. So these are all cumulative improvements that advance the technology in that way.
Okay.
And so for us, we have another group we're working with for innovation accelerators. So they're working on the blue sky, the big ideas, the metal anodes, the anode free, and those type of innovations where they're not as involved in the day-to-day aspect with the customers. And that's part of the way you advance the technology to the step change. And at the same time, you advance the technology in terms of improved product performance and features.
So there's many questions going through my head right now, James, and a lot of them have to do with India as well. But first up, is Faradion the only company that's offering the sodium ion technology, or do you have competitors in this technology? Because you've talked about patents, in particular China, and I have a whole set of questions on that. But is Faradion the only company with sodium ion technology today?
Well, as we mentioned, CATL has made an announcement that they will be going into it, but as I said, we're already into it. We're shipping product and generating revenue. No, there are a few other companies that have gotten into the space. There's a company in California called Natron. There's a company in Sweden, Altris. There was a company called Aquion Technology as well.
So there's a lot of innovation and investment in sodium ion technology from what you've just said. Before I come to India, you talked about having a Chinese patent. I'm going to ask you an incendiary question. Not a lot of people will believe in intellectual property protection in China. You obviously do, given that you filed a patent protection in the country. I'm interested in your opinion on that.
Yeah, we used to joke and say NDA in China means you don't put it on the internet, but I think it is a challenging market. I think it's gotten better. We file patents worldwide, India, Australia, US, Europe, all those places, and China as well. Korea and Japan, and I think it's important to do that. If there is a violation, you do have the first approach is a matter of fairness and integrity discussions. It's quite interesting. Argonne developed the NMC technology in the U.S. and as a government institution, they didn't really file patents worldwide. They only filed them in the U.S. because it's expensive. It's our second highest cost is managing our IP behind our team. And what was interesting is people started copying it. They were doing it everywhere. And then General Motors wanted to use LG to produce the NMC technology, and the fact that they had a patent in the US, they can stop those products from being shipped into the US. So Jeff Chamberlain flew out to LG, and they cut a license deal with LG there. And so I think that's been our strategy, is to be able to really have the core IP to be very defensible in that way.
So coming to India then, James, your first success was in Australia, and then I think your very early second success was signing with a trucking company in India. Today, electric mobility is just about starting to bubble in India. We have a few 100,000 scooters already on the road, a similar amount of, probably 1 million now, electric rickshaws, particularly in the northern Indian states. And the three major automotive companies in India have all launched electric vehicles in the last 12 months. So this is happening. The cities will have electric buses as a majority of their fleet over the next 5 years. What has been missing in this jigsaw, or the domino that still needs to fall, in other words, is the gigafactories that need to come to India to make lithium batteries or lithium cells, cell manufacturing plants in India. 5 have been announced. There's a Japanese joint venture. Some of the major Indian groups have said they'll do it. And these are, of course, all lithium-ion chemistries, all different kinds of chemistries, but all lithium-ion based. Do you think that India is a big market to suddenly move to sodium-ion? Because what you are talking about, if proven and sustainable, answers a lot of questions of the big barriers to implementation of electric vehicles in India. Not just the cost of lithium-ion batteries, but the energy independence and the fact that these investments are just being made, so it's quite easy to integrate sodium-ion. Are you excited about that? How are you going to play into this?
I think India is going to be massive, when it happens, and that's the big question, is when it happens. I think the government, well, if you just step back, if you look at what China did, China really put in an end-to-end strategy. They built the gigafactories, they incentivized consumers to create demand, to fill the gigafactories, they secured the material supply chain. China controls 72% of the refinement of cobalt, 65% of the world's graphite supply, 30 times the lithium reserves compared to the US, and so they really put an end-to-end strategy there. Again, 80% of the cost to sell is the material. You build a gigafactory in India, you're still dependent on China for the material supply chain. And I think that's not really fully well understood. The other area is everybody is talking about lithium in India as well, and that's what the customers know and what they're asking for. And I always like the quote from Henry Ford. He said, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they would have told me faster horses. And so I do think you need to kind of look beyond that. If you look at India in particular, 30 of the most polluted cities in the world, 22 are in India. India is the largest importer of oil worldwide. And if you want to get away from your dependence on the Middle East for oil and clean up the environment and go more towards a renewable energy, then you become dependent on China in terms of the material supply chain. Sodium ion gives the opportunity to have energy security, to clean up the environment from a sustainability. You have a vertical integration. I think in many homes in India there's Tata salt on the table, right? And so I think India has all of the abilities to become the world leader in beyond lithium. My experience, though, is someone explained this to me from India, said India is a bit like when you see penguins moving to the edge of the ice. They all massively move at the same time, and then they stop at the edge. And then they're waiting to see who's going to jump in first, and they push one in, and then if there's no blood, then the other ones come in. And I think India's standing at the edge of this. Is standing on the edge, waiting for someone to go. And once they go, then I think everybody will go.
So what have been your early successes in India? Tell us about the deal you've done with the trucking company in North India. I assume they are going to be implementing sodium-ion technologies in electric trucks.
Yeah, I would say there's a couple different areas that we're engaged with. That's one of them, and those are big battery packs. So ultimately, you need to, when you're doing truck batteries and you're doing that, you need to actually produce these to where you're making the vehicles. You can't ship these in from other places. So I know India's typically been importing the cells, and in many cases they can make the packs themselves and so forth. So ultimately, you need to you're stacking margins. You're not in charge of your own destiny. So I think ultimately you need to bring all of that in-house, and you need to bring it in locally. Another area that's quite interesting is we're seeing a lot of the big oil companies that, I mean, it's interesting if I'll just say this, and then maybe I'll tell you a little background on that. And that is a lot of the big oil companies are pivoting towards hydrogen, and you mentioned that earlier as well. And I think that's quite interesting, and I think it works very well for big trucks, mining trucks, but it's a hybrid, so you still need a battery. And sodium ion battery, because we have very fast charging, discharging. It's they call it the Delhi cycle. So what does a bus run in Delhi? So it needs regenerative braking, and there's these kinds of challenges. But sodium ion enables you to have about half the size of the battery than a lithium ion, which is smaller mass, smaller weight, lower cost, and more effective solutions. So there's a lot of interest in hydrogen hybrid from some of the oil companies looking to be able to go into that area. It's the three-wheelers. It's the e-rickshaws, as we talked about as well. There's transitioning into those.
Build it and they will come, in effect.
Field of dreams.
Let's talk a little bit about the sodium ion technology then. Sodium, in many of your advocacy platforms, you talk about how sodium is ubiquitous, available everywhere, and therefore allows companies and countries energy independence. What kind of sodium are you using in the sodium ion technology? Is this something that you can get from desalinating the ocean, for example, or do you need a very specific kind of salt that you're using? What kind of refining process is required? Are these large-scale investments, or can they be done in a small scale?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in that, but it is sodium chloride, which is essentially the same as table salt. And I mean, I think India is probably one of the largest processors of sodium chloride almost worldwide, in particular. So it is readily available. It's inexpensive. Yeah, there is the oceans. There's in most every country there's sodium chloride. There's a lot in the UK here, for example. So it is pretty readily available. It's as I said, 1,000 times more plentiful in the earth than lithium. So and accessing it is quite different than doing the lithium mining, and you can harvest it. I don't know if the desalination is going to be the low-cost way to do it, but if we start running low in other areas, maybe that is an opportunity.
I ask because India has a lot of salt pans. It's something that we've been doing for over 500 years. In low-lying areas, you let the ocean in, and then you bund it, and you let the water evaporate, and that leaves you lots of salt. So it's been done for generations here. We're well before the British identified that they could tax that, bringing in the salt tax, which eventually gave us one of the reasons for independence. But yeah, so I guess your answer is that it is abundantly available in most countries. It's sodium chloride. There's lots of production capabilities. And it's quite interesting that, as you say, present gigafactory investments are not made redundant, because the way you've designed your own technology means that a lithium ion cell production line could in fact start manufacturing sodium ion cells without much changes. So does that mean that a gigafactory that's doing lithium ion one day can in fact make sodium ion the next day? Is it as easy as that, or is it a complex process that's almost permanent changeover?
It is easy as that. I think the one caveat I would say, if you're running it on the same line, you have to clean out the line from the coating. You don't want cross-contamination of chemistry, but the equipment is the same. And our partners are currently running them on the same lines they run lithium. We have a coating partner. They code on lithium on Monday, and on Tuesday they code ours. So that's something that's quite easy. However, I think for us to really be able to scale, we need to have dedicated lines. You can't be cleaning out the line and avoiding cross-contamination. So this is what we're really working on now. We're looking to put in what we call a low-volume line in Sheffield. So we're doing a fundraise right now to put in about 1 million cell capacity in Sheffield, and then we qualify our partners, reduce cycles of learning in the development aspect of it, and then we move those qualified customers over to our high volume manufacturing partners, who will dedicate a line when they move past the proof of concept stage into the volume manufacturing. So I think what we'll see is the customers that we're engaged with are major, they're the number one or two in particular markets or geographic region, and when they go, they go. And so it's sort of this gradual to suddenly shift after the qualification. So we have a whole ecosystem in place of partners that manufacture the cathodes, that manufacture the anodes. These are large-scale industrialization partners like Phillips 66. We've announced for the cathode, hard carbon cathode, we have Ador who's Phillips 66 is making the hard carbon anode. Ador is one of the largest catalyst companies in the world. They're producing our cathode under license. We have manufacturing partners, we have pack partners, module partners, and our business model is to deliver product to the customer, whether it sells to a lead acid company that maybe have their own pack manufacturing, or like in Australia, we deliver packs for residential, commercial, utility, and so it really depends on what the customer, but we need to stay close to the end user and the application to continue to advance the technology.
So, dream time is one of the role descriptions of a CEO. I'm sure you indulge in it very often. Where do you see this industry, say, 5 years and 10 years from today? Do you see sodium ion being the dominant technology 10 years from now and scratching at 50-50 5 years from today? What are your own, assessments of where this is heading?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we'll continue to see innovation, and I think what's to me very attractive about Faradion and sodium ion technology is because we use all the same infrastructure, we use the same basic system. If there's solid state for lithium ion, it works for sodium ion as well. So we stand on the shoulders of all of these massive companies that are doing development, and we can import those improvements in addition to our own improvements. So I think it enables us to always be able to continue to advance the technology. I think the big prize is the passenger EV market ultimately. I mean, that is the biggest prize, and it's the biggest opportunity in terms of sustainability and really making a fundamental change into the environment. I think the challenges, I grew up in the late 60s in the US, and we had Kennedy put the whole nation behind a single vision, the space race, put a man on the moon and beat Russia, be the first ones to do that. And it was amazing, I mean, and we did it, and the whole country was behind it. There was a CEO of a defense contractor back in those days. He flew back from a business trip, came in the company on a Sunday night to get some papers, and there was a guy sweeping the floor, and he said, "Well, what are you doing here Sunday night sweeping the floor?" And the guy said, "I'm helping to put a man on the moon." And I think there was a vision behind all that, and we did it, and I think that's something that's missing in India is really to get the whole country behind a single vision to go. I think India has a massive opportunity. You have the knowledge from the people. You have some of the most educated people. You have the resources. You have the market. You have everything to go beyond lithium and to be leapfrog China and be the leader in the next generation of sustainable renewable energy in the world. But like the US, what we did was we put a man on the moon, and it became almost a single event, and we stopped. And then we had to pay Russia to put an astronaut on the International Space Station. And when they didn't like us, it cost more, they didn't do it right away. And you cannot outsource your energy security. You cannot outsource exploration and innovation. And I think you see what SpaceX did, and they fundamentally changed space travel. And I think this is what we need from India is you need an end-to-end strategy. You need to get the whole nation behind this unique opportunity here, because the world is changing, and it may not feel like it. The world doesn't stand still. Certainly felt like it last year with COVID, but it's amazing, what can happen out there. And
so, staying with that theme, then, James, we ask this question to everybody who comes on. It's usually the last question we ask on the podcast. And you've talked about you gave some strong advice to India there, and so I'll pose it to you. If you were to give one piece of advice to the Prime Minister of India on what he could do to help India be energy independent and have sodium ion be the leading technology in India, enabling very fast adoption of electric vehicle mobility because the cost will drop as a result. If you could give him advice to do just one thing, what would that one thing be?
That's a good question. To do one thing. I think it's pretty much what I just said. Is I said get the nation behind a single vision. I think if you can power all of this knowledge, all of your resources, and you can harness this and really drive it into a single direction. I mean, it's a tsunami. You know, the power and the force that can be done, and the speed in which things can happen are unbelievable.
James, it's been an incredible pleasure to have you on the program. We've learned so much, in fact. I'm very motivated and excited about what this means, not just for electric mobility adoption in India, but in the globe, and for a sustainable planet long-term, addressing the weaknesses of lithium-ion technology. Thank you so very much for having made time for our program.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it, and I feel energized as well. So thank you.
Super.